In today's video, CodingBat.com, section Logic-1, question cigar party. So we're going to be looking at the cigar party question here in Python Logic-1, and let's start by reading out the question and then sort of pointing out some aspects of this question that are going to impact the solution that we're going to code up. So, when squirrels get together for a party, they like to have cigars. And a squirrel party is successful when the number of cigars is between 40 and 60 inclusive. And this inclusive is going to be important in our answer. And this is the situation unless it is the weekend. And in this case, there is no upper bound on the number of cigars. So we're going to return true if the party is successful or false otherwise. So return true if the party is successful and return false if the party is unsuccessful. And what makes a party successful? Basically, it's going to be the number of cigars. Coming down to our function, we can see that this function takes two arguments. The first being cigars, which represents an integer, be it 30 or 50 or whatever, an integer for the number of cigars. And the second argument is weekend, which is represented by a bool, a true-false boolean that says, is it the weekend? True. Is it the weekend? False. So these are our two arguments that we're going to have to work with in our solution. So for me, I'm thinking that the first thing we need to do is handle the situation where it could be the weekend. So what I would do is if is weekend, return true. But that's not quite enough, because if it's the weekend, we need to know the number of cigars is going to be greater than or equal to 40. So there's going to be no upper bound. It just needs to be at least 40 cigars. So we could do something like if is weekend and cigars is greater than or equal to 40. So this should definitely work for this situation. If it's the weekend and the cigars are greater than or equal to 40, we're going to return true. That makes a successful party. So now we're going to deal with the next situation. And the next situation is when cigars are greater than or equal to 40 and less than or equal to 60. So we could do if cigars are greater than or equal to 40 and cigars are less than or equal to 60, return true. Right? Because it's going to be successful when the number of cigars is between 40 and 60 inclusive. So this is between 40 and 60. It's going to be less than or equal to 40, or it's going to be greater than or equal to 40, or less than or equal to 60. So there we're going to return true as well. And so now that I read the question, I can't see any other situations where the party would be successful. So I think this first one and this second if statement are the only situations where a party would be successful. So what we're going to do is otherwise return false. So basically, if it can't meet the first case or it can't meet the second case, then it's going to return this, which we're going to return false. That would be an unsuccessful party. So now that we have our question and answer coded up, let's click go and see how this works. And zoom out a little bit, and we can see that all test cases have passed. We're getting all correct, all green. This is good to go. So now that we know that our solution is good to go, is there any way we could improve this? Is there anything we could do about this solution to make it more efficient or easier to read or better to reason about, faster, right? So those are things that we're going to want to think about, questions we're going to want to ask ourselves. So tell me, do you guys see anything here? Because I can think of one or two things we can do to make it more efficient. Well, if we go to show hint, they say that one approach begins with if is weekend and only if is weekend. Whereas, of course, I started with the weekend as well, and so that was a great way to start. But I also added in this second condition. And there's a way that we could code the solution to not have the condition there, but actually in the return statement itself. And so we can basically replace that part of the if statement with code in the return statement itself. And if we click go again, this will run successfully. So these statements are basically equivalent, at least in terms of their outcome. If you want, you could also wrap opening and closing brackets around it just to make it even more clear that this is a concise one-line statement, that this is what you want to occur. Personally, I do find the brackets make it a little bit easier to read, and it'll work both ways. So green again with the brackets and green without the brackets, and we can run this, and this is a interesting improvement that we have made to our answer. Now, if we click on show hint again, we can see that they use an else statement here, whereas what we're doing is not an else. We have a much longer answer. So how could we actually restructure this with an else statement? And we basically draw inspiration from what we did on the line above. And what I would do is else return, we'll use our brackets here, and we'll have cigars greater than 40 and cigars less than or equal to 60. And we can remove all that code that we had before, and we can run this again, and we get all green again. So this is awesome. We've actually reduced at least one line of code from our previous answer, and we've also made the logic easier to understand as well, because we've switched it to more of a simple if-else statement. Now, maybe there is some argument around, should we be putting these kind of Boolean logic statements in the return statement itself? Some people like it, some people don't, and prefer to just have return true or return false like we had before. But I think it's interesting to look at both ways. And we could actually do a little bit more to make this more efficient on this return statement. So I was thinking that we could do 40 less than or equal to cigars less than or equal to 60. And we can click this again and see that once again, all correct, good to go, all test statements passed. So this is a second way to write out that same return statement. And of course, we can always test it and kind of make it break on purpose, things like that. Have the upper or the lower bound, a place where we want to test. But yeah, so 40 less than or equal to cigars less than or equal to 60. So this is probably about as terse as it can get. This has been the cigar party question in section Logic-1 on CodingBat.com. Here's the answer for you, and I hope you'd enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.